You see, I take these glasses off. She looks like a regular person, doesn't she, huh? Put them back on. Formaldehyde face. That's what we got.
That's enough out of you.
I got my root beer.
Oh.
I got my chapstick on. Let's party.
Is the root beer requires chapstick to enjoy? Is that how that works?
It was just a combination that had to happen.
Your lips get all dry and chapped when you drink root beer. I get it. It happens. What can you do? Hey, welcome to Growing Up Punk, the podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. My name is David, and your name, sir, is Aaron, right?
That is what my mother calls me.
Oh, that was awfully nice of her. It's it's easy to remember. It's spelled strangely. I don't know what we're going to do with this, talking about names. Go follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Growing Punk Pod. You'll find our personal Instagram and information there. And Twitter, I mean, one of us is still there and the other is still a butthead. So
right, yes.
I did update the Twitter profile so it actually says your host at David Growing Up and some butthead. So until you get on
That
Twitter,
is me.
that shall remain.
Search me up. You'll find me somewhere.
Yeah. I got a funny story of something that happened today. Not so much funny. I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's just entertaining. So this morning, I was getting the children ready for school. They're eating breakfast. And a lot of times I'll put music on because, just something going. And my go-to kind of like in the morning is typically Jimmy Eat World, just because it's sort of something that everybody will listen to. Like my wife likes them. I like them.
Yeah, nice.
I know they're not going to be overly offensive, all that kind of stuff. And so, and we have like an Amazon Echo Dot or whatever, right? So I say, hey, Alexa, play Jimmy Eat World. So it starts playing. And then I say, Alexa, turn it down because it was a little loud. And at that point, my 6-year-old daughter says, no, don't turn it down. I like Rockstar. And I'm like, I stood there for a moment, like my mouth kind of just like open and confused because the song that was playing by Jimmy Eat World was Rockstar off of Static Prevails, right? Their first kind of their first recognized full length. They had a self-title before that I guess they just kind of pretend doesn't exist. But so this song is playing and I'm just like, wait, what did you say? And I got her to repeat it several times because I was like, maybe she's just saying she likes rock songs. And every time she's like, I like Rockstar. I like Rockstar. In the end, she was just saying like she likes rock music and like rock stars sort of thing. But I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like this, it was just like this moment of just like pure chance, coincidence sort of thing. But it was so entertaining and so funny that I was like, I had to tweet it. So I tweeted it earlier today on our Twitter at Growing Punk Pod. So
nice.
There you go.
I've got a little music story as well.
Yeah.
So there's a guy named Andy Schaff from around these parts. He's a singer and he's fairly well known. So he was on Jimmy Kimmel actually about a week ago or so. And he's this like really nice, soft-spoken guy. And so as I was joking around with my other friend last week about it and just about him being on Jimmy Kimmel and just like the monitors not being loud enough or something and just having him be like, Jimmy, I can't hear. Like as if Jimmy Kimmel would be like running the sound booth or something.
Jimmy.
So stupid. But the reason I thought of that is because Andy Schaff is playing here tonight.
Right.
He's playing a sold out show here and my buddy's at it, so he just reminded me about it.
I think he just played.
But
I think he just played here the other night. I had a friend on Instagram who was posting pictures from an Andy Schaff show. So either it was here or he traveled to go see him somewhere not too far from here. But
okay, cool.
So I was like, look at that name popping up again. And I think I saw something come up about him being on Kimmel as well. For some, I don't know where it popped up because I don't follow him. So someone was posting about it. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Jimmy. Jimmy,
I can't hear myself, Jimmy.
Jimmy, do you think I could get just like a touch more in the monitors? If it's too loud, it's okay, Jim.
It just pans to Jimmy, and he's just like, I'm not at the soundboard.
me.
I don't know.
Oh, that's too funny. But we're not.
Sorry, Andy. We love you.
We're not here to talk about Jimmy Eat World or Andy Schaaf. We're here to wrap up our Easy Core episodes. So this is technically episode 3. And I was thinking, this is the last in this series. And I was like, what do we call it? I was like, let's call it the Newfound Glory Easy Core.
Oh,
The
nice.
Newfound Glory Easy Core. So we started with an episode on Newfound Glory where we talked about a couple of their albums. And then last episode, if you should go get caught up if this is your first time listening, but we talked about A Day to Remember and Chunk, No Captain Chunk, a couple of their records. So this time, we're going to talk about Set Your Goals, and we're going to talk about a little band that actually just released a brand new album, and I released a review, a discussion about it, 4 Years Strong. We're not talking about that record, though, because it's too new. So first and foremost, let's get into the record This Will Be the Death of Us by Set Your Goals. So both of these records technically were a pick of yours. I was only somewhat familiar with one of them, and it wasn't this one. This was my very first time listening to Set Your Goals and listening to this album. So why don't you tell me a little bit about how you kind of first got into the band?
Yeah, well, I remember when their album Mutiny came out. So I think that was their first full length. It was on a smaller label called Eulogy. And I remember hearing it and just kind of thinking, yeah, there's not really anything that special about this. So I just kind of left it or whatever. And then when this album came out, I, kind of with hesitance, checked it out and just immediately loved it. I haven't actually gone back and listened to Mutiny since. Maybe I should, just to see what it is I didn't like, or maybe I would like it now. But I mean, this album is just overall way more polished. They signed with Epitaph, and they just blew up. It was just the perfect timing and a great label to showcase them. And and I've been a fan ever since.
It's interesting because, I mean, out of the bands that we've talked about in this series, this is the band. When I saw that they were signed to Epitaph, I was kind of like, or at least this record was released on Epitaph, I was like, yeah, out of the bands we talked about, this is the one I could see like potentially kind of having that foot more into the traditional punk rock. Maybe actually these two bands, because 4 Years Strong kind of has some more hardcore influences, whereas this I found. I struggled at first listening to it, being like, okay, so what's dubbing this easycore? Except when you kind of like read up on some of the first easycore bands. We talked about Newfound Glory. Another band that gets mentioned is actually Sum 41, which there's parts on this record that definitely remind me of Sum 41. More so vocally, I think, than musically. There's a couple songs where it sounds like they listened to Fat Lip by Sum 41 and were like, oh, this whole idea of like mixing like rap sort of stuff with pop punk is like so cool. And honestly, when I first put this record on, the first few songs I was kind of like, okay, yeah, I'm into this, because the first one's kind of, it starts, if I remember, it starts off not fast, but it kind of gets faster, and then the second song is this weird sort of thing, and then it kind of transitions into the third song, which is another kind of good fast pop punk song, and then it kind of goes down this trail where I'm like, what is happening vocally with this band that I just can't, there's something I couldn't understand. And after a few listens, it kind of grew on me a little bit, but it was almost a thing that initially sort of just turned me off from the band.
Yeah, and I picked up on it more now than I did, when this would have come out. I can't think of any other bands at this time that would have had two vocalists for, a pop punk band.
Yeah.
I'm curious to what brought that on.
Well, I mean,
and it's, yeah, like,
I was going to say, Blink 182 has always been a thing. That's what it, like.
Well, I just mean where it's just, like, I don't think
4 Years
the
Strong
vocalists.
they're all over there. Come on, man.
No, but I mean, those bands are playing like guitars and stuff too.
Oh,
I don't
you mean?
know if
Oh,
both
I see
these
what you're saying.
singers-
Yeah. Now I follow. Sorry, I just thought you meant like.
And where it's, so back and forth, Blink
Yeah.
and those bands, it's like they'll pick a song or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if I really picked up on that right away, but yeah, now that I listen to it, there's definitely parts where I don't feel like the vocals play off each other as well as they could.
Yeah.
Some songs are definitely stronger than
Yeah.
others, and
They aren't this like, and it's funny to compare these two bands because they're both bands that have two lead. I think Set Your Goals.
Right.
I think it's two lead singers. Maybe there's more. I don't know.
Yeah.
But both having more than just one lead singer and kind of going back and forth. That you're right. I think like with Set Your Goals, it definitely feels the vocals give it a feel of maybe a little less polished, a little less well-rounded. They also at the same time they kind of do some very different things vocally.
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, what it actually kind of reminded me of outside of Sum 41, maybe more when they're just straight up singing, how the vocal delivery happens reminds me a little bit of Taking Back Sunday, like early Taking Back Sunday, and how they kind of have that. I like the best word I could sort of come up with to describe it, and actually it was a word I think I used to describe 4 Years Strong, but is like combative. Like the vocals are kind of constantly struggling with each other, going back, but also working off of each other, going back and forth. It's unique. It gives them very much their own sound. I didn't go outside of this record to listen to what they had done after this record and if it was any more polished or not. But I'd be curious, like I might go and listen to some of their even later stuff and see like, oh, did they get better like at doing what they were doing? Only time would tell.
Yeah, and I don't think it's bad by any means. I think it's one of the things that makes them stand out.
Yeah.
If it was just one of those vocalists, it would still be a great band, still a great album. So kind of one of those weird, like it's a bit odd, but it plays to their strengths.
Yeah.
I think more than it does than adding any weakness.
One thing I think in this episode versus our last Easy Core episode that I appreciate is that both of these bands really, but this band specifically, rely less on like that, oh, let's make sure it is a pop punk song with the breakdown sort of thing, right? Like there isn't really much, unless you want to count like bouncier breakdowns where they go halftime, but it's not necessarily to be heavy. It's halftime to just like find a groove sort of deal or whatever. They're not really chugging much. There might have been one or two songs, I want to say, in the back half of the record that got a little heavier, but for the most part, it was really just like bouncy and kind of fun, and some vocals that get a little shouty at times, but nothing like, we're not talking A Day to Remember here where it's full on screams and breakdowns. So, but yeah, I thought we would, as we do, we're going to take a look at, we're going to take a closer look at 3 songs off this record, starting with the song Look Closer. So this is, I am automatically drawn to songs that sound like this. I think, when we talked about Newfound Glory and Not Without a Fight, the one song that I picked off that record was Truck Stop Blues, because the guitar riff in it reminds me of, and we just mentioned Blink, of like a Tom DeLonge-esque riff. And that was the first thing I noticed on this song. This is the 3rd track on the album. It's like the second full song, because track 2, it's really weird, the sequencing on this record, because they go from a song into like this sort of like almost interlude-ish song with like spoken word type thing that then transitions into this song, and it's kind of different, but also the vocal, like the spoken word sort of thing, the effect they have on the vocal, all I can think of when I hear it is like a villain from a Spider-Man cartoon, because it's like almost got this like robotic voice going on. But yeah, the guitar riff that comes in after the first maybe 6 or 7 seconds of the song, maybe a few more, I don't know. But anyway, you'll know it when you hear it. It reminds me of Blink, and immediately I was kind of like, okay, not sure where this record's going, but I really like this guitar riff, and then the kind of, as I mentioned, combative vocals that kind of go back and forth. But this song, did you do much digging on this song and find out what it's about?
No, not specifically. It's funny you mention the Blink reference, because I thought that on this album as well. I don't know if it's just the kind of, thinner guitar sound.
Sure. Yeah.
It's definitely, comparing it to the last episode with Chunk and A Day to Remember, like those bands actually had, a heavier, not just overall sound, but even guitars. And so another reason why I think this album stands out in this genre, but even maybe I don't like it sound-wise as much, but it stands out just because it's a bit different. It's not kind of that monotone heaviness.
And I think and I think that's one of the things that really jumped out to me is musically this record. I was like, oh, it reminds me more of stuff I would have normally been listening to. Just in like I am drawn more to like, that thinner guitar, like especially for like the lead riffs versus, kind of heavier riffs typically, right? Like, so when I hear a riff that sounds like, a Blink-182 riff, because I think Tom DeLonge, especially in that whole, like when pop punk was at its peak, Tom DeLonge, he was kind of the guy who was like, like wrote riffs that were memorable, right?
Right.
And so when bands kind of try to emulate that a little bit, I can kind of get behind it if they pull it off. But this song specifically, I was thrown off at first because track 2, like I said, has that like spoken word thing going on. And then there's this, I think the song kind of stops and it goes into track 3, and one line in that same kind of robotic sort of voice gets said at the beginning of the song. I'm like, that's so weird. Why would they not just make that smoother? There's this odd transition piece. So I kind of like looked into it, and the song, those two songs themselves are inspired by, what's the movie called? Oh, They Live, which is a movie from like the late 80s with Rowdy Roddy Piper playing like the lead.
Never heard of him.
So I looked up because the song before it, the title of it is actually specifically related to the movie. But basically, the idea is like the main character, Roddy Piper in the movie, puts on these sunglasses that enables him to see these basically like hidden messages and everything. So he looks at a billboard, and instead of it being this advertisement for whatever, the billboard, when he's got the sunglasses on, says obey. And then there's things that say like no free thought, and just like all these different things. So it's talking about basically like subliminal messages, and to just basically tell everyone to fall in line to keep, buying the products you're told to buy and thinking the things you're supposed to think, and like all these. So like that song,
Right.
I was intrigued because the chorus kind of talks about, it says consume and obey and all this stuff, and being plugged in and turned on, and then, wake up, sort of like you got to get out of this, see what you're falling for, sort of thing. And so as far as like I just appreciated that they're clearly a band on some of their songs where they've got a message on like a social commentary sort of thing that they are trying to portray, which I appreciated that they're trying to do something more with their lyrics, because you got some bands that are just feel good, you got some bands that are more introspective, and then you got some bands that just have kind of like a message, and these guys, I think, try to get a message across. In some of their songs, there are some that we'll talk about where it's clearly just having fun, but
Right.
So yeah, I thought that was interesting. I haven't seen the movie They Live, but and I watched like the clip that I was just describing. It's about a 10-minute scene,
Yeah.
and I was like, I don't know if I want to watch it. It's pretty poorly done. I'm sure the message is pretty powerful, but the movie itself is very dated.
Yeah. No, I always appreciate a song that kind of makes me just remind me to not just be, a consumer
Right.
zombie going about day to day. And I don't really think I am. I try to be aware of that. I mean, I want to be a minimalist. I hate stuff and advertising, and my wife always always bugs her. We'll like be driving or something, and I'll see some advertisement for something, and it will just irk me. I'll just be like, that's so dumb. Like, why do they think people are going to buy this product because of however they did it? Obviously people do, because the advertising works, but
Yeah.
it's just so many things. I'm like, I can't get into that. And
Which is hilarious as we hold this conversation over FaceTime.
well, yeah, but I just mean like whether it's like fast food signs
Yeah.
or just these things.
You got
that
something against Whopper
advertisers
Wednesday? You kidding me?
Dude, I can get diarrhea any day of the week. I don't need to wait till Wednesday.
Yeah, but Wednesday you only get it for like $5. You don't have to pay that much to get it on Wednesday.
But yeah, just not going day by day, just doing what everyone kind of does,
Yeah.
and buying stuff,
Yeah.
and maybe the songs like you said, more about subliminal messages and things. But yeah, I think it's a good reminder for all of us.
Yeah.
Let's be aware of where we are, what's in front of us, and not, just get sucked into this cycle of nonsense that is life sucking.
And so it was a song that kind of took me a little bit by surprise. Just in, like I said, what we had sort of been listening to leading up to this was, whether it was, A Day to Remember. And there are songs more about like I said, like self-help and self-health sort of thing, like mental health sort of thing, or Chunk being a little more fun, a little more lighthearted, not necessarily being goofy or anything, but just that altogether like feel good vibe. And actually, we mentioned something on that episode. This is just kind of a bit of a rabbit trail, but we talked about the intro on what's it called? Worst Case Scenario, and just how cheesy we thought it was. And we actually heard back from I don't know who in the band it was, because I think, did it come from their Instagram account, or was it?
No, it's from what's his name, Paul?
Okay.
But
basically saying they intentionally made it cheesy because they didn't want to get they started as a lighthearted band, and they just found their things were kind of getting more serious, so they just wanted to be reminded of the fact that they used to just be about, it's super fun and cheesy. So I thought that was great, because I kind of I don't know if I said it on the episode, but as I was like thinking about it afterwards, I was like, I feel like that's intentionally cheesy. So
I should have known that.
Yeah. Anyway, back to this. So Look Closer. Yeah, it was the first song, and I mean, obviously, it's only track 3 on the album, but it was the first song to sort of immediately jump out at me and go, "Yeah, I want to put this on again." But that leads us to the next song, which kind of was the opposite. We're going to talk about the song "Summer Jam," and I say kind of the opposite with this in regards to like my reaction to it, because when I first heard it, I was like, what the hell is this supposed to be? Like, this song is so like dumb sounding, right? The more I listened to it, I was kind of like, okay, it's fun, and they're just kind of basically telling the story of their band, and I'm like, all right. The vocal delivery, though, it was one of those songs that was originally like very challenging for me to get into, and like almost had me writing the band off a little bit. But I mean, here we are talking about it. So what are your thoughts on Summer Jam?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's there's not a ton to take away lyrically in it, but you know what, I always like these kind of songs, even similar to the one you talked about with the Swellers a few weeks ago, where it's, it's really specific. You're reading, it's like, okay, well, this is very clear about what this is about, but it makes you kind of wonder, I wonder what the story is behind this. There's just a few lines where they'll mention a person or a band or something, and someone who's been on tour, there's so many crazy memories that happen, and I wouldn't write a song like that, but I do like it. I can appreciate it. And
well, and for myself, like, that was one of the thoughts I had too, was like talking about The Best I Ever Had by the Swellers, and how there's kind of like some very specific references and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it, to see if we could like figure out some of these things that were going on here. Because first and foremost, what I wanted to say is, I used to, when like bands would reference other songs in their songs, or other bands, there was a time where I kind of found it, like, maybe because it didn't happen very often, and it happens more now, or so it seems, where I thought it was like kind of a little cheesy to do.
Yeah.
And then the song Bukowski by Moose Blood, they referenced a couple, like they referenced the album Clarity by Jimmy Eat World, and they referenced The Sound of Settling by Death Cab for Cutie, and then like, some movies I love and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, like when I connect to the references, then it's a different story, and I can kind of kind of get into it. But so there's a few things that I wanted to bring up. First of all, there is the line where I think they say something along the lines of, "We're meeting up soon with the Warriors," and I had to think about that. I was like, wait a minute. I wanted to look back. I was like, is this who I think they're talking about? Because again, I hadn't heard the song until just this past week, basically.
Right.
And so I had to message a guy and be like, when you're in this song, when they're referencing the Warriors, are they talking about you? And I was talking about, I was messaging Roger Camaro, because he's been on the podcast. And he's like, yeah, that's we toured with them a couple times or whatever. So I was like, oh, that's pretty fantastic. So that's our direct connection to Set Your Goals, is that Roger Camaro from the Warriors has been on the podcast and they toured with Set Your Goals and got mentioned in a song. But in case those of you are wondering, I didn't do an interview about the Warriors. It was about No Motive. He plays bass in No Motive, or did anyway. So that's pretty cool. But another one of the thing, they mentioned anticipating the fall with Newfound, which is obviously Newfound Glory. The thing that I'm curious about, because they don't specifically in this song say the year. Earlier in that verse, they say a year, which would make, if it's the same year, it's a little too early. But I'm curious to know if that tour with Newfound is in fact the Easy Core tour, because I think that happened in like the fall of 2008. The Easy Core tour, which had Newfound Glory and Set Your Goals and had A Day to Remember and 4 Years Strong. And yeah. So the only band that we talked about that wasn't on that tour is Chunk, no Captain Chunk, I believe. But yeah, so I'm curious to know, like, possibly if that's what they're referencing, because if they are, that's super meta in what we're doing here and why we're doing it. And I thought fits pretty cool. But I'm sure they toured with them a few times anyway.
Yeah, there was a few, but I think that was the first major one they did with them. Just as I was looking kind of bands they had toured with, that I think that was their kind of first major tour like that. And I also noticed, just speaking of the Warriors, that Set Your Goals did a lot of touring with heavier bands, which, some bands that I was like, like bands like Parkway Drive, and there was another one that I was like, oh wow, like, I know a lot of these bands kind of crossed over.
Yeah.
But kind of different seeing them on bills with kind of metal bands,
especially like with their sound. Like I would be less surprised, if we were talking about A Day to Remember and you're saying that, or even Chunk and you're saying that, or even 4 Years Strong, really, with some of their stuff and you're saying that. But yeah, like just with Set Your Goals being a little more rooted in kind of pop punk, punk rock, and even skate punk at times, more so than these heavier genres. It is a bit of a surprise. One that I was trying to figure out is when they say awestruck by GB in Berlin. The only thing that I could come up with,
Gorilla Biscuits.
And I was like, I wonder if that's what they're referencing there, just being like, obviously being influenced by hardcore, and just going, if that's what that was. When I first heard, I was like, what were they even trying to think? I'm like, who are some of their contemporaries? But then the awestruck thing makes it sound like, oh no, it's got to be someone who is like, laid the ground for them, sort of.
Right.
And so Gorilla Biscuits was what I could come up with. And I'm not, maybe I'm right, maybe not. But you thought it too, or did you just think it now when I said it?
Just when you said GB, that was the first band that popped into my mind. There was another reference in that song. It was like COS or something.
Okay.
I couldn't figure out. I don't have the lyrics in front of me.
I think, or is it?
There was another reference
CIS,
there
I think, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. Crime in Stereo. That's what it would be.
Is that a band?
Yeah.
Okay, I've never.
That's so weird how you can just think 3 letters. I mean, Crime in Stereo wasn't even a band I really liked.
Right. Oh yeah.
But
now that you say it, the name is coming back to me a little bit. When you first said Crime in Stereo, I was like, "Are you making a joke about Death by Stereo?"
Oh no, they were a band that was around the same time and same kind of influences. And
they did. There is a line in there where they talk about being in Georgia with fireworks in a holding cell, and I was trying to figure out. I was like, they can't be about the band Fireworks, because the band because the only reason I say that is because the band Fireworks, like their debut full length, didn't come out for another couple of years. After that, but I'm because I think it was 2011.
So actual Fireworks.
But when you look up the lyrics, at least on Genius.com, Fireworks is capitalized. So I don't know where they're getting them from. Like if they're getting them from a lyric book or something. So I'm like, it could be that they could have. For all I know, I'm not overly familiar with Fireworks. I've listened to them a bit, but I wouldn't know their back catalog that well. So they may have had an EP or two, or even an independent release or whatever that's just not on streaming services. I don't know, but I'm convinced that it probably is them, which is cool because it also shows you like the variety of bands that they toured with.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like Newfound Glory, Fireworks being on the pop punk side, obviously the Warriors being on the heavier hardcore side, Gorilla Biscuits. Well, I don't know if they toured with Gorilla Biscuits, but they're mentioning them, and it's like, it's kind of cool. But that was sort of why I wanted to talk about this song, because even when I listen to it now, it still annoys me a little bit, just the overall sound. I do want to know what happened in Texas on their first tour, but unfortunately you can't hear it. It like cuts in the middle of the song. He's like, I remember we're on our first tour, we were in Texas.
Oh,
And I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
What happened? Like, tell me now. But they left me hanging.
Probably something not too good.
Maybe it's referenced on like their next album or something. They're like, no, you got to tune in next time. But yeah, it is. It's definitely a fun like party song sort of thing, just being about with your friends.
Yeah.
And kind of like the notion and the idea where they say, what did they say? Like they wrote the soundtrack, like
to their own lives or whatever. Yeah,
so I'm like, that's kind
I
of
thought
cool.
that was a really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote that down as.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a cool line! Like just, and I mean, going, again, just reminiscing on, the nostalgia of touring and just being on the road, and like really, that's. I mean, you're listening to music in the van as you travel, but really, what's on your mind is like, what you're playing that night. And it's so weird. Yeah, it's not really maybe something I've thought about as much, but I mean, that's essentially your own songs, the soundtrack to your life.
It's pretty sweet. So that brings us to the last track we're going to talk about off of. This will be The Death of Us by Set Your Goals, and that's The Few That Remain. This song, what to say about this song?
It's awesome.
It's good. The message behind the song kind of annoys me a little bit because I kind of hesitate to judge an artist's motives behind what they do. And this whole song is basically about chastising someone for, they used to be in it for the music, now they're in it for the money sort of thing. And now they could write this song from a personal space, like, and actually knowing someone who, yeah, man, you used to be all about the music and now you're just making all these choices because it's going to make you the most money. And if that's the case, that's fine. They can do that, right? Because they're not just making a judgment from afar that they're thinking like, oh, look at this band, all of a sudden they've signed to a major label or this or that. They're just they changed their sound so they can get on the radio, this thing, that thing, sort of deal. If they've got that personal connection, I feel like, yeah, okay, I guess you can make that. You've probably had those conversations. But me as a listener, when I kind of listen to it, I'm always just like, when people make that argument, like, oh, this band's sold out because now they're on a major label, and I'm always just like, you mean bands can't make money? They can't make a living? Like,
yeah, no, it's stupid.
And so like, that's just really sort of the vibe that I get from it. I get the idea of, someone being let down by an artist who they like maybe really connected to lyrically, and, maybe whatever their mission statement was or what have you as a band early on. And then that changed. I can get being let down and being disappointed by that, but I'm always like, you know what? Who am I to say what they can and can't do, right? Like, and what their motives are behind doing things, and so it's like a lot of times we've had this discussion with different bands where they change their sound over time. Let's say, right? Like, like let's look at, because we mentioned them already this episode, and I feel like we mentioned them probably every episode, but like Blink-182. Obviously changed their sound over time. Now, their original success, I don't think they really changed their sound going from what they started as a band to, like that pop punk early 2000s. They refined their sound. They got much better at it, but they didn't really change their sound, obviously, until Untitled, which even then I'm kind of like, okay, I don't think they made a change that was like, let's get ourselves on radio. They made a change that was a little more experimental. But when you look at, say, like Nine, for instance, it's a lot poppier and radio friendly, I think, than they had ever been. But at the same point, like, I listen to it and I go, yeah, but maybe that's just where they're at writing songs. Like, them as that, like Blink as a band, I don't think they're trying to be like, let's get on radio. We want to get a huge radio hit, right? Like, they're in their late 40s.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think they care about that anymore. Maybe it's a bad example, but just when bands make those changes, I'm always like, who am I to say why they're doing this? Maybe that's just where they're at now for making music. Maybe this whole time they've wanted to be able to make a decent career out of making music. Who knows, right? So just that sort of like take in this song, it kind of turns me off a little bit. The song itself is fine. The Hayley Williams feature is unique.
Yeah. To me, that's a standout on the album, and I put that might even be one of my favorite Hayley moments.
Sure.
I mean, I love the first few Paramore records, and obviously she's a great singer, but I love that. I love that part. It just makes it really kind of fun, and just how they're like, hey, can I get in on this part?
Hell yeah.
Yeah, just a cool part to the song that adds a lot to it, and and then I love when they both come in singing, and
Yeah.
I love that part of the song.
There's a couple things about that part that stand out to me. First, just with the message behind the song, I can't help but see the irony in Hayley Williams being on this song, and kind of eventually how, you know, like Paramore would change their sound. And I'm sure a lot of people were like, oh, I can't say, you know what I mean? Like, so the irony there is kind of funny to me. But how you write something like that specific transition, right? Like, who comes up with that idea to be like, oh, let's make it sound like she interrupts us, and the band kind of, you know, falls apart a little bit for a second there when she's like, hey, can I get on this? And like, hell yeah, dude, come on, or whatever, right? Like, it's like, how do you write that? You got to write that together? Did you just write that in the studio? Like, you know what I mean? It's just like this weird part that I'm like, it's cool and it makes it stand out, but where did it come from?
Yeah, I'm sure it started as a joke, like, you know, they're sitting around or whatever. Maybe they played a show or were touring together or something, and, you know, thinking of doing that guest spot. And it's like, oh, you should just like pretend like you just like literally
just burst into the
walked
studio.
into the room and, oh, you guys are recording. Hey, can I get in on this?
Yeah, all right.
But, to me, it fits well with the theme of the band.
Sure,
and just the kind of the fun take on it.
And it's the main reason I wanted to talk about the song. But the line, if you come back, you'll have to get through all of us, that's at the very end of like Hayley's part. I can't help but in my brain picture like a prime example being like Green Day not being able to get back into Gilman Street because they'd signed to like a major label. Just like that whole like gatekeeper sort of idea. Again, like for me, it just kind of adds to a little bit of like the, I don't know. Like they can write songs about whatever they want, but I just have a hard time kind of connecting lyrically. I'm sure if I heard this song when I was, you know, in high school or something, I might be along those lines and be like, yeah, remember when that band, they changed their sound because they just wanted to do this, or they signed to a major label because they just wanted to chase money. Hoorah! But like now I'm like, let them make a living, you know? Like, why can't they just make a living? But I don't know. It is still a fun song.
I guess like anything, there are I'm sure there are bands that ruined it for others that did do exactly that did just sell out for money or whatever, and then it ruins it for those who are actually having genuine success and genuine musical shifts in their taste and the sound or whatever. But
that marks the second record that we've reviewed and discussed in this that has a Hayley Williams feature on it. So because she was on Newfound Glory, she just had more of a background vocal on Not Without a Fight. I forget which song in particular, but it was one of the ones we discussed. But anyway, that's going to move us along to the album Enemy of the World by 4 Years Strong. So this record, I don't know when, it was recently, I had finally decided, I don't know if it was in time, like with the release of the first single or two off of the current 4 Years Strong record, or if it was just before that. But for whatever reason, I was like, oh, 4 Years Strong. I've heard a lot about them. I should go listen to them. Because again, the whole reason we're doing this Easycore series is because Easycore was a genre that I, you know, outside of hearing names, I really didn't get into. Because it just kind of came along at a time where I wasn't really following what was happening in the pop punk world. And so it just, you know, blew past me or whatever. And so I've been with a few of these bands, been like, oh yeah, I got to check these guys out. In fact, Set Your Goals were the only band that I hadn't listened to a single thing by that I was aware of. But so I don't remember when I added this, but the first time I heard this record, I was pretty much hooked. I was like, okay. And I remember texting you, and I was texting you saying, 4 Years Strong is better than A Day to Remember, hands down. And I still stand by that because, to be fair, like, out of all the bands we've discussed, I think A Day to Remember might be my least favorite. Not to say I don't like them, but I'm more likely to go back to, I think, all three of these other bands before A Day to Remember. And that's just mainly because I've always been more into the punk side of things and the pop punk side of things than maybe the metalcore side of things. And A Day to Remember just leaned on that a little too much for me. But I like the fact that this band, 4 Years Strong, and even Set Your Goals, within the easycore, you know, genre, subgenre, whatever you want to call it, kind of take their influences from different places. So like 4 Years Strong reminds me more of like pop punk meets kind of like that, just straight up like hardcore, like beat down sort of thing, right?
Yeah,
like, versus, you know, more metalcore kind of stuff. But yeah, and I like that. It's, I don't know, maybe it just feels more rooted in the music I grew up listening to than some of the other bands. But so why this record from 4 Year Strong?
Well, yeah, I was just touching that. I think 4 Year Strong incorporates heavy elements into their music in a way that's maybe a bit easier to digest. You know, it's a bit more sprinkled through versus here's a poppy song with a breakdown. It's kind of like here's heavier pop parts kind of throughout. I mean, 4 Year Strong has a lot of things going for them. I love them because, so compared to Say Your Goals, to me, Say Your Goals is more kind of, you know, even just guitar based, whatever, is more kind of rhythm, guitar based, where 4 Year Strong is super riffy. Like their songs are built for me on a riff versus, you know, like a chording pattern and like a vocal hook.
Would you say their songs are built on heart and soul?
Some of them, yes.
That's a prelude to one of the songs we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah, I mean,
but
like riff wise, they're definitely like on the chunkier riff side of the, like, because it's funny when I talk about riffs, I'll talk about, you know, and I mentioned when we were talking about Set Your Goals, and like when I'm attracted to a riff, when I hear something typically that I just want to listen to over and over again, it is more of that, like, not chorded riffs, but like, you know, like those Tom DeLonge-esque kind of, I think Tom DeLonge actually described them as like nursery rhyme riffs, and maybe it's because my brain is just super simple, so I just want to hear something that's simple and catchy and easy to bop along to.
Yeah.
But yeah, 4 Year Strong definitely write some. I want to say out of all of the bands, they are the best all around songwriters out of all of the bands and composers. Like, not saying necessarily that every one of their songs is a better riff or a better lyric or this and that, but I just feel like when their songs are put together, and maybe I'm saying this from a point of having listened to Brain Pain and going like the thought that they put into those songs, which I discussed.
Yeah.
I discussed this in my review, but like the thought they put into the composition of those songs, I still get that like early on with 4 Year Strong, maybe more so than the other bands we've talked about, and it's just something that really like stands out, just like how solid they are at that.
Yeah, they definitely stand out in that regards. And again, with the dueling vocals, I mean, they play off each other so well. And I think like their voices are distinct enough that you can tell when it's one or the other, but not so distinct that it's like, oh, that's a little abrasive or that's. And I don't know how bands do that. I mean, that just seems like so much work to be like, you do this line, you do this line. Okay, but how are you going to do this phrasing? I'll do this phrasing.
Well, and again, that's like something that reminds me of, and you talk about like their vocals being distinct enough but similar enough, that reminds me of Taking Back Sunday. They were like the first band that I can remember doing this, and they probably weren't the first band to do it, but the first band that I remember really doing this kind of vocal style where it's like
kind of back
almost
and forth
conversational. Like they're not necessarily having a conversation from one line to the next with each other, but just how the deliveries are going, right? Like it feels very conversational. And there are times on this where, you know, it reminds me of Seaway, who's another band that does that. They sound more like Seaway on the new record than they do on this record. But one of the first songs that jumped out to me isn't one we're going to talk about, but I did want to mention it just kind of like on the back end of talking about how they compose songs. But the song Wasting Time, Endless Summer, I love that song. Just the way that like the drums are relentless through most of it, I find like just that kick drum is just like constant, da, 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 da. And then and like the vocal melodies, but then the guitar riffs that are going on, and then they like cut out and do like these like doo-wop ooze sort of things that just like it's just weird. Like, I don't know, the way they put like all of this together and make it fit into one song and give you like little bits of things to pick out on. I just got to appreciate. But like I said, it's not one of the songs we're going to talk about. So let's get into those. First, we're going to talk about Tonight We Feel Alive on a Saturday. Does it specifically have to be a Saturday?
That's usually the best night to feel alive.
So you actually picked all three of these songs. So why don't you start with your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, even just this song title, so kind of some backstory. So both of these albums came out. Set Your Goals was 2009. This was 2010, but they came out fairly close to each other. So this was like this huge transition in my life where I was done touring full time. I was a new dad. I was working at Mr. Sub.
Classic.
Kind of this weird like, I thought I was living out the dream, and now I think I'm living out the dream, but the dream's a lot different.
The dream now comes with lettuce and tomatoes.
Oh man, yeah. But yeah, so just that the title "Tonight We Feel Alive." Like, I bike to work, and I can remember just listening to albums like this and kind of just reminiscing on this different change of life. But songs like this and bands like this kind of helped me get through that period of time. So that's kind of why this album stood out to me. It was also the year that I saw them live for the first time, so that was awesome. Yeah. And I haven't seen them since, I don't think, so I need them to come back.
Yeah, I know, right? They just started their tour in Toronto. Like, come on, guys. We're over here.
Oh, every band, they just do Toronto, Montreal, and then they call it a North American
Maybe
tour.
do
It's the worst.
Vancouver, right? Like, yeah. This song, first of all, have you seen the video for this song?
I have, but I didn't rewatch it this week.
You failed. I wanted to talk in depth about that video. No, the video is pretty cool because it's like the Civil War sort of idea.
Oh, right, yeah.
The two guys, I didn't take down any names, but the two singers, they've got these beards, and they look like very much like they should be taking part in the Civil War when they get all. It's pretty good, but I really find like that this song is kind of about standing up and fighting for what's right. I don't know. It's just like this. I think the video fits very well because of that. Standing up and fighting for what's right, and they're kind of going through this fight, going through this struggle. Really kind of stood out for me. But this kind of like introduces a bit of a theme that I find with 4 Years Strong, at least on this album. And it's not just 4 Years Strong in and of itself, but we'll get into that in a minute, because I did want to talk about some of the lyrics where he says, talking about standing up and fighting for something. He says lines like, "Will your legs fail you when you stand too straight and tall? Because in a world gone mad, the taller you are, the harder you fall." Which is a good point. Like it seems like if you take a stand or you're trying to live that right life, as soon as you make a mistake, it's like that plummet it's fast and it's hard. And then other lines like, "You asked what would I stand for? Truth is I stand for this. It's passion perfected, fashion neglected, a natural infection of all we have seen," which is just great lines. So this song, I like that, that they're taking a stand for something. And it seems to be just like making the world a better place sort of thing, right? Like not getting caught up in the stuff that doesn't matter. But as like the album goes on, or different songs we look at, I find like it becomes a little less specific and just a little more generic, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I did find overall that there wasn't a lot on this album lyrically that really stood out to me. And just speaking of that, the song titles on this album are just so classic, like trying to be corny, cool.
Yeah.
The long titles that don't really mean anything, but which is fine. This song specifically stood out to me musically. I just thought it was cool for a second track. So the first song comes in, it's like, okay, this is going to be, just like a good head banging song. Yeah. And then track 2 comes, and I liked that it had such a different feel to it. It has, a bit of a slower tempo. It starts with that, probably like that kind of little keyboard line.
Yeah. Which kind of grates on my ears a little bit. It's pretty high. Like I find like the highs in the production there, I'm like, oh, it's pretty crisp. But especially because when we do these episodes, I'll make a playlist that's just the songs we're going to talk about, so I can kind of I'll listen to the albums, but then do sometimes where I'm just listening to the songs. And so going from the production on Set Your Goals into this song, because that's the order I had them in, it's like a drastic difference. I think this record sounds better than Set Your Goals, but like that when that high comes in, it's so crisp, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, we're on to 4 Years Strong now, and they're synths, which I will say, sorry to cut you off, but I like that their synths aren't like cheesy and in your face. You know what I mean?
Right.
But continue with what you were going to
Yeah.
say.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I never really loved the synths on this band. I mean, it was fine. To me, it didn't add or take away too much. It was just kind of there.
Yeah.
It didn't make me like super sad when that guy left. But I mean, I don't mean that in a rude way,
Right.
but just for, he was with them when I saw it live, and still I don't know, to me, just synth in this kind of a band just doesn't do much for me. That's just me personally.
But did you like the synth in, say, like Under Oath, old Under Oath?
No. I know. So actually, one band that I really did like it in was a band called Still Remains.
Okay, yeah.
And they were like a pretty kind of straight metalcore band.
You know, it's funny. So one of the first band I was in just out of high school, we were like a melodic hardcore, post-hardcore sort of band, and we were called September Still Remains.
Oh,
So
man,
every time I
look
hear
at that.
Still Remains, I'm like, oh yeah, I was in a band that basically ripped that name off.
Yeah. So yeah, synth for me has to be kind of the perfect ratio or whatever. I don't know what the term is for synth, but I did feel like, so it adds enough to this song just to make it feel different.
Yeah. I also,
Yeah.
in that band, we had a synth player too. And I ended up marrying her, so I've got a soft spot for synths in like heavier music. No,
Yeah. Well.
yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
fair.
One of those things. I'm sure it adds a lot. If you just took it out, you might be missing it. I don't know.
Right? Yeah,
But I did feel it added to this song, and I thought it was an interesting choice for a second track right after that kind of banger of an opener song.
right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's that much different, but I don't know. This song has just always stood out to me. Every time I listen to it, it's always like, oh, that's okay. That's a little bit different.
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised there's not more synth on this record, only because the artwork is clearly so like 80s movie theme inspired sort of deal. I was like, it feels like you should have more like 80s sounding synths on this record, but you don't. It's just cool artwork.
Yeah, it must just be there because there wasn't really any other major points on this record as I was listening where it's like, oh, that's definitely the synth there. Like, there's no like synth solos or.
Now it's interesting.
anyways.
I was watching like a rig rundown for the guys from, I don't know if it was a full rig rundown or if they were just interviewing them about a couple. Anyways, it was about guitar stuff for 4 Years Strong, and they were talking about how, they brought some pedals into their arsenal to make up for the fact that the synth player isn't in the band anymore. And I was like, that's kind of cool. Like, they're basically playing some of those lead lines on the guitar and make them sound like synths.
Yeah.
But you mentioned song titles a moment or two ago, so let's move to the next one, which might have the most like unique maybe song title, but 19 with neck tats. This is
It's the way to do it.
yeah. This not only is it neck tats, but it's neck tats. It's got a Z at the end of it, or a Z, I guess they would say in 4 Years Strong, being American and stuff. But I mean, it's got a great title and a super catchy chorus. And you know what? That's all you need. It's all you need to sell me is
Yeah.
a great title and a catchy chorus.
Oh yeah, as soon as it kind of gets going, it's like, all right, this
Yeah.
is one of those songs that just let's get this pit going. And
Yeah.
yeah, I love how it starts with the kind of muted guitars and the gang vocals.
Yeah. Well, and then when it like takes off after that first chorus, like I think that's when they kind of go double time or whatever, and I'm like, oh snap, because I don't think it starts with the double time. Like I think it's after the first chorus when it really kicks in. I'm like, at least that's the note I took.
it
So
is.
maybe that's just when I started paying attention. But
Yeah. Well, and speaking on that, I had a note that none of the Set Your Goal songs that we talked about were the fast ones. They were all the kind of mid-tempo ones. Just a random thing I noticed.
I think the first one has a bit of a fast part in it, but yeah, there are definitely some faster songs on that record that we didn't really get into. One thing I actually noticed about this, they've got some like lines on this record that I can just imagine hardcore kids like clamoring onto the stage to sing into the mic. like the one I referenced earlier, We Built the City on Heart and Soul. Like,
I love that part
for
so much.
sure, every time they played that song, I gotta say people are up on stage, like just like singing
Yeah.
into the mics with them. Because I mean, I feel they still very much, even though they got a lot of pop punk in them, they still very much feel more like a hardcore band, where that's 100% what they're going for, just with really great hooks.
Yeah, well, and this band is from like the more kind of East Coast,
Yeah.
so they would have
Yeah.
back to talking about their heavier influences. They would have that more than the West Coast. or whatever.
Because I think they're from Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, right.
I don't know if they're specifically from Boston, but I do believe it's somewhere in Massachusetts. But
Worcester or something,
yeah,
maybe. Yeah, and I love just that part we were talking about, that breakdown. I love how it does kind of the false breakdown. It kind of builds up, makes you think that the breakdown's coming, and then it just goes into the next verse or whatever, and then it comes back around later in the song. And every time I listen to it, the first time it comes around, I'm like, oh, yes, this is good. I'm like, oh, right. I always forget
they
that.
fooled you.
It still gets me, but
Yeah.
I kind of like that because it just builds up. It's like, okay, when it comes the next time, it's actually coming.
Yeah. I think like lyrically too, this song, what I took from it anyway was like someone who, you're trying to help someone, but they don't necessarily want the help. Was kind of what I
Right.
took from the lines. What does it take to save you? Everything you've got to bring me back down, which the way they sing that line gets stuck in my head all the time. Bring me back down. There's nothing left to save. There's nothing left for me to give you. Everything you've got just brings you back down. There's nothing left to save. Just feels like, you're trying to help them up and they're just trying to pull you down, sort of deal. It's kind of what I take away from that. And I mean, maybe I'm on to that or maybe not. I don't know. But all in all, yeah, like this song, as soon as that chorus hits, I'm like, oh, yeah. I'm singing. They've done their job. Are you?
Yeah, and I mean, like we said on all their songs, the back and forth vocals, but for some reason this one, it just really stood out to me. I love the vocal phrasing and just the back and forth just kind of hooks me in.
Yeah. No, it's a good little track. And again, yeah, I don't know. I just love the way the way you talk about like the kind of the false build to go back into a verse and all this kind of stuff. Just like the composition of songs that they do, because it's one thing to be able to write good melodies and good lyrics and whatnot, but to put the thought into like piecing this song together to fool you in one sense, or to like kind of like build that tension up even more. Like, oh no, we're not ready to go off just yet, right? Like, it's pretty great. But that'll lead us.
Yeah. Like,
oh yeah, go on.
I was going to say, yeah, some of the other bands we mentioned, they kind of stick more to that verse, chorus,
Yeah.
okay, then do the breakdown. So even just something small like you said, just composing it just a little bit different to keep you engaged instead of just being like, okay, here's the part coming that I expected to come.
Yeah.
Oh, but no, it's not that.
Yeah.
And it keeps you hooked into the song. And I think that's part of being a good songwriter is, especially in this genre, because often in punk and pop punk, it's fairly easy to predict what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so just adding those little different nuances really makes that song or album stand out.
Yeah. Which will lead us into, I think, the final song that we're going to talk about off this record, and that's What the Hell is a Gigawatt? I
still don't know.
I was super tempted to use Back to the Future movie clips from this, because that's what that comes from, is Back to the Future. But I'd already used that on an episode, so I decided it was too soon to use it again, so I did not. But
I can do a sound clip for it.
but this okay, I kind of alluded to this earlier with one of the things on this record that maybe annoys me a little bit. And it's not just, 4 Years Strong that fall into this, but this band finds a groove writing songs to kind of pump you up, to get you to stand up on this album, to do something, but without ever really laying it out. So they're not very specific, which could be, it could be a good and a bad thing. Like a good thing because you can take something from the song, whatever you want it to be, right? Like, like this song is another one of those ones that makes me feel like, they talk about a war and stuff like that in this song, and I go, okay. It's another one of those songs where I go, yeah, let's get hyped for whatever it is we're standing up against, right? But without specifically saying it, I'm also kind of like, well, all right, what are you taking a stand against? Or are you just writing a song to get people to sing along to? And so this is like something where I've noticed kind of just with like hardcore in general, where there's a lot of sort of non-specifics that people will sing along to, like almost like the cliches, right? Because like when I think of going to a hardcore show, there's two things I think of. There's dancing during the breakdowns, right? Which is classic. And then guys and girls, whatever, just clamoring to like get their mic in their face and yell along and scream along and that kind of stuff, right? In fact, our artwork that we used, which is, you know, a picture of Dylan from Means, your old band, you know, there's guys that are just like right up there. He doesn't have the mic in their faces. He's singing, but they're like ready to go sort of deal, right? But like some of the lines on this, I'm just like, what are you even singing about? But they just sound like lines written for people to shout with them. Like, today's the day we start this war. Make up your mind and decide what you're fighting for. So it's very like, okay, you just make up okay, so this song isn't really about anything except you might as well just call it Fight Song. And then another one, well, have you ever loved so much that you'd kill for it? I'd kill for this. Like that just sounds like a line written like the I'd kill for this for like guys to be like, yeah, I'd kill for this, right? Like just like get up there. And then the final was like, so listen up. If you still feel like I still feel, then rise up. It's so far gone. What is so far gone? Like, what are you singing about? It's so just like about nothing.
We call it tough guy ambiguity.
I like it. I like it. Tough guy ambiguity. That works. That works. Which is, again, it's fine. Like, the one thing I do like about it is that it is so generic that you can apply it to almost anything. You know?
Yeah, that's true.
Work sucks.
Yeah,
Here's my song about going to work, getting pumped up for it.
I found overall with this album that there wasn't a lot that I could attach myself to lyrically. Yeah. And I mean, in general, lyrics aren't the main part for me. But yeah, there was, like you said, there's kind of, you know, general things. Okay, this could be about this or that, but I don't really know. So I'm just going to kind of listen to the song.
Yeah. Yeah. I like I said, maybe I'm picking on it, you know, and it's not, I shouldn't be, because it is just like, oh, you can literally apply this to almost anything. I'm constipated. All right. Today's the day we start this war. You know, I'm going to get this out of me. Like, right? Like, just.
Oh, I'm never going to think of constipation the same way now.
You can add it to anything, you know? Like, I don't know. I do like the song. Don't get me wrong.
Tonight we feel alive. Come on, let's do this.
Come on, let's do it. Tonight's the night. Tonight is the night. Yeah.
It is Saturday.
That's the day I finally deal with this, I guess. I mean, so, like, yeah, I do like the song. I don't want it to sound like I'm just like picking on the song for the sake of picking on the song. It was just something I noticed when I was going through the lyrics and got me thinking. I'm like, man, there's so many like just like generic lines that hardcore really falls into. And, you know, some of those bands I love and fully buy into the lines as well. It's just for whatever reason on this song really jumped out to me. And I was like, but like I said, you can literally apply it to anything. And, you know, you can use it as a motivator. And if that's what they're going for, good on them. They're successful in that, right? So,
yeah,
I do appreciate, just to talk briefly about Brain Pain, how much of a progression you even see. Back in this time, it was clear that they had songwriting skills and composing skills, and they've really like molded those and taken those to another level now. But I don't know, this record's good. I really like it. It's one that I'll go back to without hesitation for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna touch on this song. Like, so when I'm picking the songs, I do take lyrics into account, but if there isn't something specific that stands out to me, then I'm going for the riffs, and this might be the heaviest song on the album, and then kind of towards the end, so it does this cool breakdown where it kind of slows down the tempo, and the drums are just going on the floor tom and the snare. And then it sounds like there's maybe a guest vocal, but I couldn't find.
Yeah, there is. I'll find out who it is. Keep talking. There is a guest vocal.
Yeah, but I loved that. The songs towards the end of the album. I just loved that it kind of was still keeping the riffs going. I have that this song kind of just rips from start to end. It slows down that tempo, but then it builds it back up with that sweet guest vocal, and that just kind of adds to the heaviness of the sound.
Oops, I was trying to type in what the hell is a gigawatt lyrics, and I failed. I think it was this song that listed a guest vocal, because I definitely looked it up. Let's see. The hell is a gigawatt? Maybe it wasn't this song.
It's gotta be, because it definitely doesn't sound like either of those two guys.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out where I saw it. Breakdown, bridge. Because it's not listed on here. Maybe it was... Like
I have the CD, but I couldn't find the liner notes.
Yeah, well, and I looked up the guy's name because I was like, oh, there it is. Featuring Jay Pepito. He is from...
The name sounds familiar.
Sang... come back here. It says he sang for Reign Supreme.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that was like a sweet melodic hardcore band.
So he comes in. I think it's on the bridge, right? Or whatever. Like
Yeah.
I'd kill.
Yeah, kind of on that breakdown part, yeah.
It's the part where he says, "Then rise up, it's so far gone," or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think, is it this song? No, maybe it's not this song. I missed a note earlier where there was just like the bass tone on this record. There's a part where maybe it was this song, and I was just thinking it in my brain, but where it just like kind of cuts out to just bass and drums, and it's just like gnarly and dirty. But
that's this part.
So it's all in all, I like this song. I just had a lyrical nitpick that I just wanted to kind of go at. But again, when it comes down to it, I'm like, it doesn't really matter. You can apply it to anything you want. But I mean, yeah, okay. So we're going to wrap this up the same way I think we wrapped up our last one. If you're stuck on an island, you're in, let's go actually with the artwork of the 4 Year Strong record, some kind of 80s movie. Where are you? Let's say you're stuck. It looks like a pirate movie. So you're like stuck out in the middle of the ocean on an abandoned pirate ship.
That sounds terrible.
or you're like trapped in some cave.
I hate being out in open water.
That's
so
fair.
I'm not
Okay,
gonna
so
enjoy
you're
listening to anything.
okay. We're back on there. We're back on the island. You can bring one of these two records with you. What are you bringing with you?
Yeah, that's a hard one. And just
not.
You touched on the cover art, and I just wanted to say I love the cover art on both of these.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge art, especially with records, and so it's always something that plays a part of it.
Yeah.
You know what? I think I'm going to go Set Your Goals.
Oh,
as I
shocked
re-listened through this, through 4 Year Strong's album. I mean, I love the album. I've listened to it a ton of times. But this week it didn't stand out to me as much as This Will Be the Death of Us. Just when I listened to that one, there was so many songs. I was like, oh man, I forgot about this song.
Right.
Like, I love this guitar part. I mean, 4 Year Strong's got so many sweet riffs, and I mean, it's an amazing album. But just based on this week, I'd have to go Set Your Goals.
I think
love both, but that's the one.
I think we're going to do the same thing we did last week, where we disagreed. I'm going to go with 4 Year Strong, but what you say there is a good point. Just in the fact that I wonder, if right now, I mean, I listen to Brain Pain so much, and if I'm like
that was one of the notes.
Yeah, if I'm like weighing on that, like kind of going like, well, 4 Year Strong for me is the all around better band.
Right.
And then, but like just comparing these two records, the only real thing I would hold against Set Your Goals, though, is I wonder if it would get tiring quicker. Just like some of those songs, like vocally, I'm like, I can't listen to this too much. It's going to wear on me. Having said that, that doesn't mean you're stuck on this island. It doesn't mean you can't skip a few songs if you get tired of them, right? So, but
you can skip the whole album on the water like a rock.
Yeah. And you know what? Yeah. Having said that, I think I'm actually going to go with Set Your Goals too. Now, I think I like 4 Year Strong as a band all around better, but just going, there is more variety on Set Your Goals, like in sound, I find, and more just like straight up fun songs, even though, after a while they get annoying. And I think lyrically there's more to kind of look at, just like knowing some of their, like the influence from They Live. And then later in the album, I feel like they're talking about, maybe more environmental concerns sort of things. Just as a band, lyrically, I think they're a little more diverse than really any of the bands we've reviewed in this series. So yeah, you know what? It almost pains me to say it a little bit, but I'm going with Set Your Goals. And that's nothing against Set Your Goals either. I just have really been enjoying 4 Year Strong lately, so it is what it is. But we're going to wrap this up mainly because my iPad that we're doing this on, I just keep getting notifications on the battery percentage. It's plugged in, but apparently it's not charging. Either that or you're just providing so much energy on the other side of the screen, it's sucking it right out of my iPad. So we're going to wrap this episode up. Yeah, wherever you're listening to this, make sure you rate, review, subscribe, all that stuff. I should have said this at the beginning, but if you listen to it on YouTube, go find it on your favorite podcast app so you can get the full experience. And follow us on our social media sites, Twitter and Instagram at Growing Punk Pod. We're also on Facebook, all that good stuff. But yes, that'll do it for another episode of Growing Up Punk. Thanks for listening, and bye-bye.
See you next week.
We don't actually see them, you know that, right?
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.